There, welcome to Bible/Chat. Kevin, hello.
Hello, it's good to have you back.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Yeah. I listened to the first, but not the second of the one you and Gus did together, and I realized that I'm totally unnecessary to Bible/Chat. Always helpful.
Not true. Not true.
It's
Very
good for
helpful.
the soul to know you've been replaced, and the replacement is better. So, anyway, hey, so we had a question that came
Yes.
up, a helpful question. We know that Jesus was born. He was incarnated. He took on flesh and came into the world. And in coming into the world, he takes on a body and a physical appearance, and he remains in that body. Colossians 2:9. He remains in that bodily form forever in heaven.
Yes.
The fullness of deity dwells in him. And yet, John chapter 12, we hear from John that Isaiah actually saw the incarnate Christ, or Christ himself, in Isaiah chapter 6, when we see the throne room of heaven. He's sitting on the throne, his train fills the temple, and they're worshiping Yahweh there. Holy, holy, holy is Yahweh of hosts, the whole earth is full of his glory. That's Christ, John says. So, in what sense is Jesus visible in the Old Testament prior to his incarnation at his birth in the New Testament?
Yeah, good question. So it gets into the topic of theophanies, which is the revelation of God in some sense, some manifestation of God's being, right?
Yeah.
And so John 1:18 says no one has ever seen God. So in that sense, just pure deity isn't revealed. That's not. No man can see God and live, as he says in Exodus, is it 33 or 4?
Yeah.
So that we know that much. But there are passages when we read our Bibles. Let's say we start the Bible in a year program. You read Genesis. You're reading with Abraham in chapter 18, when it's just before Sodom and Gomorrah. These three men come to him, right? And these three visitors, these heavenly visitors, and then two of them turn and go to Sodom. And then in verse 22, it says the men turned away from there and went toward Sodom while Abraham was still standing before Yahweh.
Yeah.
So that third one was the Lord, was a pre-incarnate manifestation of Christ.
Yeah.
What's really fascinating is I think it might be easy to think, well, it's like a hologram, it's kind of some sort of, not real being. But what's interesting is it says earlier that Abraham made them food and they ate it. So they have bodies.
They, including him.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and we know the other two are angels. And so they take a physical form. Like they can actually eat food and have their feet washed and sorts of things. So that's actually amazing. And so we're 18 chapters into Genesis, and we're already challenged with that.
Yeah.
So
the presence of Yahweh.
Yes.
In a physical form. Functioning as a human. Before the incarnation.
Christmas.
Before Christmas.
So what do we do with that? And I think what's helpful is to take it on its face and say, yes, that happened. And then theologically, it might loosen up our understanding of the incarnation and sharpen that, because it's not that, well, he was just a hologram in the Old Testament, but now he's really here.
Yeah.
It was, the New Testament was something different. That was him being born as the seed of the woman, Genesis 3, into the human race to identify with them, be their king, be their representative, their leader, their priest forever. And so, and to die, as Hebrews says. Yeah. And so realizing that's the ministry that began to be manifested at Christmas, that's a different thing. But it's not to deny that he could have had a physical form prior to that.
Yeah.
Now, that's not to say God is a physical being, because John 4 says God is spirit, but it does open the door for those kind of manifestations, which continue with Joshua standing before the commander of the Lord's army with a sword,
and he's big.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And
Isaiah 6, he's a huge being.
Yeah.
He just
high and lifted up.
High and lifted up. He's sitting on a throne, and it says the train of his robe fills the temple. So he's so massive that he's essentially embodied, filling the temple. So
it's smoking. There's glory. The angels are shouting. It's this wild scene.
Yeah.
So in a sense, the Bible helps us see where we can't go and where we can go. And it's Genesis tells us he can have a physical form. He can eat food, before he's incarnate. And we don't need to hold such a narrow view of the incarnation that precludes that. But also, we don't want to take the incarnation we don't want this to minimize the incarnation,
Totally.
which is him pledging himself to our nature forever.
Yeah.
And so
tying himself to that human form
Yeah.
through birth.
Yeah.
Which now remains forever.
Right.
Yeah. So before that language of manifestation, so he's being seen, he's functioning, but he doesn't take on that form, the morphe of man, that
Yeah,
idea.
right.
Like he doesn't take that form on entirely.
permanently.
Yeah.
He's not born as a man. He's making that. It's miraculous, right?
Yeah.
He's making that body and all of that manifestation appear.
Yeah.
But it's different than in Hebrews in Psalm 40, right? Like
Yeah.
a body you've prepared for me.
Yeah, yeah,
and then
exactly.
I
Yeah.
am, which is what John Owen talks about this in his book, The Glory of Christ, which we both read and
Yeah, yeah.
enjoy.
Love.
Right, so good. Where he talks about like Christ has pledged himself to our nature forever. And so we
Yeah.
know that our nature is safe with him. And so we take care to our persons, our souls are, like that. But Christ himself says like, yes, I have welcomed humanity back to the like to God,
Yeah,
like in that
totally.
way. It's like, wow, what a thought.
That's incredible. Yeah.
So
That's awesome.
helpful.
So when you see, just to like give clarity here. So there's tons of clarity, but just to like sort of summarize it. So when we're seeing these manifestations of a being, of a person, we're not saying that is the incarnate Christ.
No.
We're saying that's a manifestation of Christ prior to the incarnation,
Right.
in which he, in a miraculous way, gives himself a body.
Yes.
In the same way that he gives those angels bodies,
Yes.
and they appear to be men, clearly.
Right.
So that language is something that God is doing miraculously for the purposes of essentially self-disclosure to
Yes.
different people, Abraham, various people, Joshua,
Yeah.
Isaiah, and that self-disclosure is, in a sense, the same ministry that Christ
Mm-hmm.
has in his earthly life, but those are just pockets of that taking place.
Yes, yeah, exactly. It helps us see that when we talk about the incarnation,
Yeah.
we're making a technical definition of that word.
Yeah, yeah.
And so to say like, oh, he manifested himself with a body or something like that, incarnation is not a biblical word, so we got to
Right.
use it carefully.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's like, do we call that the incarnation? No, because
Yeah, yeah.
the bulk of church history calls the other one
The birth. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
incarnation.
Totally, yeah.
But to realize, okay, the categories have a little bit of overlap.
Okay, cool. Super helpful, Kevin. Thank you so much.
thank you.
This is one of those ones where you start to touch and you're like, oh, it's a mystery, and you kind of dive down into it. But
Yeah.
thanks for giving us some clarity on that. Of
course.
Appreciate it. All right, well, hope that's helpful for you. If you have questions on this or any other topic, you can always email us at info@faithbibleoc.org. Thanks so much.